Hey everyone, my name's Karel, and today we're going to be starting off our new series, which is going to start looking through each and every single one of the traps in Meet Your Maker. First off, though, I want to give a shout out to Madoshiro from the Meet Your Maker community Discord for helping me sort out some of my audio configuration, so hopefully I should sound a bit better today. Anyway, first off on the list is the humble Boltshot trap. It's a pretty simple trap that just tries to shoot you with some darts. Now, at first glance, Boltshot trap mechanics are simple enough. You step in front of it, there's a short delay, it fires some darts at you. If those darts touch you, you die. If you hit the trap, it dies. Pretty simple. However, in reality, Boltshots are one of the most mechanically complex traps in Meet Your Maker, and proper use of these things is kind of what separates the best builders from the rest of the pack. Now, Boltshot traps do start unlocked when you buy the game, but they do have 4 available upgrades from the trap maker over here. Go into the traps, pick upgrade trap on the Boltshot, and we can see the list of available upgrades. As of launch, these have 4, the first of which is Double Down. Pretty simple, this lets the trap be triggered twice. There is a small delay after the first trigger while the trap is rearmed before it can fire again, but if the raider crosses the trap's path after that second arm is ready to go, then it will fire at you and try and hit you with that second wave of bolts as well. There's also Hunter here, which gives the bolts a surprising amount of homing. That is actually a fairly strong amount of homing applied to the trap, and the bolts also will turn red as they fly at you. So it's fairly easy to identify. It also has this triangle symbol, the triangle facing down specifically, that will tell you both in the raid and in build mode what mod is applied to this trap. The next upgrade is Overshot here. It will increase the trap's detection range by 1 square. It will also increase the range of the projectiles by about the same amount. So this is 1 tile of extra range. Very important to note that. It doesn't sound like a lot, and under normal circumstances, it's not going to do a whole lot for you. But there are a few select circumstances when you're firing down an extremely long hallway where that 1 extra tile of range can mean that the Boltshot trap gets a shot off instead of getting shot by the raider before the bolts can be launched. The last mod is Second Wave, which of course is the usual Second Wave mod that all traps have. This hides the trap and makes it appear invisible until the gen mat is picked up. Now, the Second Wave mods all have a common 4-second delay. Everything that has Second Wave applied to it has a 4-second delay before it becomes active and available for the trap to do its normal thing. That might not be an exact number, but it's about 4 seconds in there. That means that the trap will not actually be able to do anything, but it will be visible and breakable by the raider for 4 full seconds. Don't put these directly in the line of sight of the raider when they pick up the gen mat, or they will just get broken and do nothing. Now, we've all seen this before. Boltshot bolts can, of course, be deflected by equipment, right? So we've got the arc barrier here. If I pull the arc barrier out, it will deflect those bolts. Likewise, the light sword can also deflect bolts with a well-timed parry, and the raider will be perfectly fine. We're all familiar with that. However, what's not known as much is that the ranged weapons can also deflect bolts. Now, deflecting bolts with ranged weapons is a little bit of an art form here. You can see over on the trap where each of the bolts is going to come from, right? There's 4 across in each of these 3 rows, and there's 2 in the middle. If you get caught by the ones in the middle, nothing's going to save you. However, if you can get to the edge of the Boltshot's arc of fire, you have a chance of being able to shoot down those 2 bolts right on the edge, and if you can do that and stick up against a wall, there's a very slim chance that you might be able to use a dual gun setup to deflect enough bolts to stay alive before you get killed by one of these traps. Now, obviously, deflecting Boltshot bolts is going to be a last resort for pretty much everyone here. You're going to be better off just stepping back out of range rather than trying to spam shots at one of these bolts, because it's really hard to do. This is not reliable in any way, shape, or form. As you can see, I'm just going to get killed repeatedly over and over again here. However, there are a couple of other weird things you can do, like grenades will actually destroy Boltshot bolts if you get the timing right. Obviously, this doesn't work in all cases, and it's not something you want to try reliably, but it can happen. You can actually destroy most of those bolts with a grenade, and only usually 1 or 2 will slip through. Maybe enough to save your life in some exceptional circumstances. So, as we've mentioned, Boltshots do fire an individual bolt from each and every one of these little divots with the spike in it. You can see there, if you count them all up, there's 14 of them in there. Now, they all have an individual hitbox. Under normal circumstances, that doesn't make much difference, and you can kind of think of them as just firing a wall of bolts at you. But occasionally when you're playing in co-op or when you're shooting or parrying bolts, it can be important to parry specific ones or block specific ones. Or if you're able to step behind Harvey as he's passing by, for instance. Harvey will block certain ones of those bolts, so it's important that you stand behind Harvey in the right spot to not die. Now, there's another weird trick. You can kind of pick which of these bolts and how many of them and at what angles they make their way through some combinations of angled blocks. So for instance, if I plop this thing down here, you can see we're going to get a few bolts from the top right coming through there. If I put another angled block down, you can see only 3 of those bolts are going to come out, and they're going to come out from the top center 3 of those various different bolts in the trap. So you can basically dictate which bolts come out of the trap, what angle those come from, and a bunch of other interesting factors. Now, one thing that's important to note is that Boltshot bolts are fired with a very slight angle towards the center of the trap. Now, under most circumstances, that's not terribly important. However, if I fire from that Boltshot trap down below me, and then those bolts go up into the air and come back down, they will come back down and still be able to kill me. Most importantly, they will hit the top of the remainder of the block, of which they just shot the bottom. Looking back at the construction of this particular setup, we can see that the bolt shot just needs to be facing upwards towards any sort of an angled block, and the bolts from one half of the bolt shot trap will fly up into the air, and since they have that very slight motion towards the center of the bolt shot trap, they will actually come back down on top of the angle, as well as the bolts from the other side of that trap just hitting the angle straight up. Now, Boltshot traps obviously kill guards, they'll also break open tombs, they'll destroy your other traps, so you need to be careful about their placement. However, they don't require any clearance in front of them to place. We have an example of this over here. If I tried to place, say, an impaler trap over here, I can't do it because it requires a block of clearance in front of it. A Boltshot trap, however, is perfectly happy to be situated right there, so you can get them a little bit closer to raiders than you would under normal circumstances. So let's talk about the mods for a minute. We've already been over what exactly the mods do. Most of them do exactly what they say on the tin. For instance, here with the Overshot mod, I can hit Y to show the exact range of each of these 2 traps, and you can see that the Overshot makes the Boltshot trigger 1 block further away than the other unmodded Boltshot trap. So that's all well and good, but let's talk a little bit about the 10-ton elephant in the room, which is the Hunter mod. This thing is crazy. It is really, really, really good. These things have really strong tracking. They can hit raiders around completely unexpected corners, and while the trap won't trigger through corrosive cubes or hollow cubes, bolts from a Boltshot trap will still travel through those quite happily, and Hunter bolts will track you through them. That makes Hunter bolts extremely deadly in corrosive cube and hollow cube rich environments. So if you're building some sort of a corrosive cube maze or something like that, Hunter Boltshot traps are one of your best friends. Now, it's worth noting that Hunter bolts don't really track unless the raider is fairly in front of the trap, as you have to be somewhere in its field of fire or near it for the Hunter bolts to start tracking. So if I'm over here, you can see they track me quite nicely. However, if I start looking at this Boltshot trap over here, I can run right past this thing. It's not going to track me at all. Those bolts are going to go straight into that wall. They're not going to home or track in the slightest. So these are best used at long range. Now, there is one case in which you shouldn't use Hunter bolts. In this particular case, I've got double gun here, so I'm not really well equipped for defense. Obviously, I could use a grenade or a deployable shield, but let's just assume that I'm not going to think of that in time, and we're going to go trigger this trap. Hunter bolts will track the bolts towards me as I go to one edge of the map, so I'm going to go to one edge of this wall here, trigger the trap, they're going to track me, and then I will dodge to the side, and I'm fine. The Hunter bolts will track me as I go towards the side, and then if I suddenly jog to the other side using the grappling hook, basically it has to be the grappling hook, I am not going to be able to walk out of the side in time. But if I go from one side of the room to the other, those Hunter bolts will not react quickly enough, and they won't hit me. Now obviously that isn't what you want here, but if I just left the Hunter mod off of that, those bolts would have come straight down the hallway and there wouldn't have been no dodging them. I would have had to have stepped back or used my deployable shield or grenade, or tried to shoot the bolts down, which is very finicky and difficult to do. So in general, in these long 1x1 corridors, don't use Hunter bolts. Now speaking of strategy, builders often use these Boltshot traps in long 1x1 hallways. So even though the bolts are really good here and they will catch any raider that is just walking towards them, 4 of the 5 weapons and at least 3 of the deployables will have some sort of answer to this, right? My bolt guns here have some sort of an answer to it. A lot of people run a melee weapon, which will have an answer to it unless you're using the heavy sledge blade. The arc barrier, of course, has an answer to this. The deployable shield, the grenades, Phoenix pod, I can just let them hit me and then revive. There's all sorts of answers to these things in a long 1x1 corridor. Some of those obviously use consumables, and that's not great for the raider, but honestly, these Boltshot traps in a 1x1 corridor just aren't going to do a whole lot under most circumstances. Even if the player doesn't have any answers whatsoever to these, you can just step backwards. If I test again here, you'll see, again, this is with the Hunter bolt, so I could just sidestep again, but I can literally just hold S here, and those bolts are going to fall well short of me. That's not really even a serious threat in any way, shape, or form. Now, as a result of the limitations of the Boltshot trap, a flat wall of bolt shots, or a single bolt shot, or even a complex bolt shot only setup involving a ton of different skillfully placed bolt shots with homing bolts and all of that other fun stuff, none of that's going to kill really good raiders. You have to combo the bolt shot with other traps in order to make it effective. If you put them on their own, they're just not going to do anything. Now, quite frankly, you can coat an entire room in just bolt shot traps, and if a skilled raider runs into that room, odds are they're going to make it out just fine, no problems. They might have to use a single piece of deployable equipment or the arc barrier, but they're going to be fine. You're never going to kill someone with just the bolt shots. So that might lead you to think that they're underpowered or that they're somehow not useful, but that's not the case. These are some of the most useful traps in the game because they're so versatile. The raider has a ton of answers to them, yes, but the raider has to know when to deploy those answers. The grenade requires very precise timing. The deployable shield requires that you know a bolt shot is fired at you and that the bolts are coming towards you. Same with the sword deflection. The arc barrier requires timing. All those require that the raider be on their toes and ready to deflect those bolts. If you don't have that, if there are other things going on in the map to distract the raider, to pull their attention away, to really do anything to take their attention off of the bolt shot trap, then they can be very effective. However, do not use them in a vacuum. Again, always combo them with other traps, other circumstances. You have to make the raider aware of other things in the room so that the bolt shot has a chance to do its job. So that's all I've got for the bolt shot for today. Next time we're going to take a look at the Impaler trap, or maybe some of the other early traps that you get access to. Thanks for watching, and hope you have a good day.